Hello and welcome to the business of the business. I am your co-host, JP John Poz from the Two Man Power Trip, and of course, joining me is wrestling's financial genius himself, Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Doing well. This week was interesting. You never know what the news will bring. Will turn into a TNA deep dive for a little bit of a sneak preview of what we're going to talk about. Just so much TNA news and little tidbits along the way. But I always like to have something visual. And I don't have too much TNA stuff, but I did have this. I'm not sure if you've ever seen this, John.
No.
It's a card from 2010, the TriStar series, and it might be a little bit hard to see, but I'm sure you recognize your favorite, Dixie Carter, Hulk Hogan and Dixie Carter. And this is TNA Impact, Monday, March 8th. Monday Night Magic, TNA, The New Era. So this was probably by the time the card came out that they weren't on Monday nights anymore, but in the processing of the card, there was sort of that excitement for what things could be for TNA.
What is going on in TNA? What is this deep dive? Because I feel like now that they're associated with NXT, they've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to talking about NXT and Jordynne Grace, but a few things before that, and this might be something that has been there for a while. I just didn't notice it yet. You know, when you send out a press release, of course, there's a description of a company at the very bottom, so people have a point of reference. So just looking at it, a subsidiary of Anthem and a division of Anthem Sports Group, TNA, is one of the world's top wrestling brands, producing over 200 hours of original content annually and televised in 200 countries, including Access TV. We'll come back to that 200 company number. Founded in 2002, TNA Wrestling's deep library of premium content includes Hulk Hogan, the Road Warriors, Macho Man Randy Savage, Sting, AJ Styles, Kurt Angle, and many more. So it's interesting that they lean back on, and nothing wrong with it, but lean back on sort of the classic names because they have a big library that they monetize. And many more are streamed across the world on key OTT platforms, including Pluto, Roku, Samsung TV Plus, and its own on-demand subscription service, TNA Plus. One of the things to note, of course, again, is that TKO's parent company manages on-demand or streaming services, and one of them is TNA Plus. So that helps in terms of brand synergy. TNA Wrestling has a powerful social media presence with over 10 million engaged followers across all major services. Ancillary businesses. So this is interesting that they're like, that's our primary stuff. Ancillary businesses include live events, merchandise, licensing, and sponsorship, which makes sense. You know, they are, for all intents and purposes, a content or television company. So, John, I had to look this up, and it seems like it's not as easy an answer as it seems, but a quick trivia question. How many countries are there in the world?
150.
So it's interesting because it's hard to pin down a number. So you're close, depending on the official number. So officially, according to the United Nations, it's 193. There are two countries that are non-member observer states, the Holy See and the state of Palestine. So that brings us to 195. Now, TNA claims that they air in 200 countries. So off the bat, they claim that they air in more countries than there are in the world.
Yeah.
However, that's a little suspect in itself. However, when you put something on X or Twitter, somebody always has some more insight. And thank you, David James. So FIFA, has under their auspices, 211. So those aren't necessarily countries. Those can be sovereign states, things like that. So not to get too controversial, but like when John Cena was in promoting one of his movies in China, right? And he mentioned Taiwan at a certain point, like China was mad, so China doesn't want to consider Taiwan a country, that sort of thing, and even more granular points than that. So even if there are 211, which is kind of a stretch, does TNA air in 200 of them? I don't think so. It could be a PR mistake or whatever it may be, but we do know with things like the Zone that they pick up a number of quote unquote random countries, not to say one is greater than another, but in terms of monetary and so on, like Azerbaijan, for example, like you wouldn't think about that as like a major market in terms of content, but it adds to the total. So TNA is in a lot of countries. I'm just a little bit suspect if they're in all of them or more than all of them.
I would be fascinated to know that exactly which countries they are. It is interesting though. Obviously, being in US is big, but now Canada may be big. And I was just talking to PCO, and he was saying Montreal it's going to be big. So they are growing. I don't know about maybe 195 countries, but they are growing in some countries. There's no doubt about that.
So yeah, Montreal. This is something that's been on our radar for several weeks. I'm not sure how long they have ever since they announced it, especially with having an asset like PCO there who is so ingrained in the Quebec wrestling culture, having helped drawn a number of big houses even in the mid 90s when pro wrestling was down everywhere else, certainly facing Jacques Rougeau, that sort of thing, and continuing to be somebody of interest, someone that gets a lot of media attention. And as we were sorting out last week, and John, you were right that Speedball Mike Bailey is French Canadian as well. So you have another performer that has deep ties to the market, and generally being a Canadian company. I don't know if that helps that much one way or another in Quebec, but they do have that advantage. So just for staying there and reflecting on that for a little while. This after 48 hours, more Slammiversary tickets have been sold than for any TNA show over the past 10 years.
Whoa!
So that's pretty amazing, and not completely surprising. So just to go back on some things, some people are like, when there's sellouts announced, they're like, oh, what's the maximum size of the venue, and it's a sellout. So like, closer to me, the Westchester County Center, I believe it's a 3,500 seat venue maximum, and TNA had claimed that they had sold that out, or that the building was full. It was announced, and obviously, it was a smaller setup, right? Because Slammiversary hasn't sold. If the Westchester County Center was full with 3,500, Slammiversary wasn't set up to be that big. This Verdun Arena can seat 4,000 total. So TNA's executives confirmed today that they are looking to expand the arena setup, which will lead to additional prime tickets for sale. TNA will update on any additional tickets in the coming days. So I think I had the count around 436, something like that, last week in terms of reserve seats. And then there's the big bleachers. In terms of the current setup, 1/4 of those bleachers are cut off, with their ring entrance. So I don't know if they can max out to 4,000 unless they don't have a sort of like a tunnel staging setup, which sometimes, like if you're completely sold out, like looks cool not to do that. But I think that they'll continue to do well, and it's still early. So that's really cool. TVA Sports, which is a French language media outlet in the area, had a piece covering the event. Wrestling fans will once again be served this summer as the TNA Wrestling Federation will hold its annual Slammiversary brand event on July 20th in the Verdun Auditorium, where the weekly show Impact will also be broadcast the next day. The second day ticket sales looked pretty good as well. We'll come back to that in a moment. The Quebec metropolis has been spoiled in recent years with Elimination Chamber in February 23, Raw on April 15th, as well as 2 evenings from AEW, which presented its flagship shows at the Bell Center December 5th and 6th. Although my comment. Like, that was kind of an embarrassing attendance. However, to the great joy of two local figures in Pierre Carl Ouellette and Mike Speedball Bailey, it is TNA's turn to arrive in town, and for the occasion, they will do things in a big way. It's our WrestleMania, Ouellette exclaimed in a telephone interview this week, who expects a full house of about 4,000 spectators. People will go see the show before they go on vacation. The holding of this gala, which will be held in Canada for a second time in a row, will obviously have been the result of several discussions with Montreal municipal authorities. That's interesting, right? We have no notion to believe that they're being paid a site fee, but something about the the government, municipalities, and so on, like, keeps being in the conversation for pro wrestling. The project had also been in the plans of the former president of TNA, Demore, for a long time. However, there is more wrestling is booming in Quebec, according to PCO, better known as the Perfect Creation. It's like in hockey, where the booing has stopped, people are no longer negative. I listen to the chants and how the crowd participates. Everyone is in and on board. I had done a media tour, and I already felt a wave of love. Everywhere, the fight is healthy. Yes, man, I definitely see the buzz. For any bumpiness, this is translated directly from French, so it's not necessarily a direct quote. However, the success of Quebecers like Owens and Zayn on the world wrestling scene does not at all harm the public's interest in the discipline. The emergence of wrestlers from here is good news for the media. We are proud of it. It's like we're the ones who will succeed. We saw it with other heroes like Lemieux in hockey. It strengthens ties to Quebec. Certainly, the one having the manager Destro at his side when he climbs into the ring hopes to deliver a major fight with significant stakes during his visit to Verdun. However, he's not the only one known face in TNA, and other wrestlers are expected to attract plenty of attention. The Federation's contingent includes Moose, the latter is in fact a former NFL guard, AJ Francis, who comes from WWE, precisely among the former standard bearers of the organization who work in TNA today. We note Matt Hardy, Mustafa Ali, Nick Nemeth, Tommy Dreamer, Santino Morello, and Rhino. Okay, so in terms of Slammiversary tickets, outside of maybe like one or two individual tickets, the reserved seating is completely gone. That will be looked to be expanded. Two ways around are currently the bleachers. So I'm not sure of the positioning, how much more you can open that up, but I think significant amount. But you can also see, actually, you know what? I'm looking at it in reverse. I am looking at it correctly. Okay, so in terms of the second day of ticket sales, you see like the first two rows on some sides, and like most of the rows on the other sides are gone in terms of reserved seats. So that's a much faster trajectory than expected usually. So staying in TNA, but before we move on from Montreal, anything else that we should talk about with Montreal or Quebec market, John?
No, I think that's good. I was kind of just interested in, because I think that they're doing better in that market. They're doing good in that market. I was just curious about like the 2,300 arena and the Philly market, just because like it seems like, okay, they're kind of established in Montreal, but Philly, are they that established in Philly? Which obviously 2,300 arena is ECW arena. It's wrestling royalty or whatever you want to say. But how have they established themselves as far as Philadelphia is concerned?
So as we're recording a little bit less than a month out, it's slow. About the first row is gone, some of the second row, and a little bit spotting here and there. The first day, the second day actually, which is a Saturday, looks like it's doing a drop better, maybe about the same or a drop better. Then in Cicero Stadium, tickets have begun. Against all odds, it looks like tickets are moving a lot better than they had been. Several rows gone. Some of the spacing, it's hard to tell. So we'll have to see sort of when we have more of a visual with that. And of course, in the second day, typically that's a struggle. So a fair amount of tickets left there. And they just announced Florida State Fairgrounds in Tampa, where they hadn't been in a while, on August 2nd and August 3rd there. So, okay, so that's the live event. So now talking about what's been the main news for many TNA fans over the week, the WWE relationship and Jordynne Grace. John, did you happen to be watching NXT when she came out?
No, I was actually what sporting event was on? I forget what I was watching, but it was either NHL or NBA playoffs, and I was just following on social media, and I was like, "Get the hell out of there!" They're actually teaming up NXT. Like this is a totally new world. This is Triple H's baby now, and HBK is working with TNA. What is going on here? So I feel like if Vince was around, this would never would have happened. But it was a nice little shock to get when you're going through social media and you're like, wow, TNA NXT relationships. It's kind of cool. Let's see where this leads.
Yeah, and I think in terms of knowing the talents, to some degree, usually like really through social media, I think Jordynne Grace was the perfect choice. Obviously, we saw in the Royal Rumble that she was a standout, and it's like it sort of keeps it interesting because, and I'm sure she would succeed day to day on the WWE roster, no doubts about that. But in terms of like a collaboration rather than like having it where people just get used to it, I don't know if you remember, John, but I remember like with the once it was past that excitement with ECW with WWE, and then they'd be on like whatever it was, like Shotgun or whatever, like Sabu and RVD, and you're like, is this that special anymore? But here, like Jordynne Grace appear, and she has the belt, and she's going for a belt, and it gives them more attention. It gives a shot in the arm to NXT. It was apparently the most viewed segment according to Ben Thurston of WrestleNomics this week. So so talk about that. There'll be like a mystery competitor or like an open challenge from Jordynne Grace on the next Impact pay-per-view, which is like a hard thing because sometimes people have like inflated expectations of who that will be, and then maybe for Slammiversary. But it's interesting, like for Slammiversary, I'm sure they wouldn't want to turn down any attention, but Slammiversary is kind of something that, as we were just talking about, like TNA really accomplished on its own. And if you like send like a major star or stars from WWE to it, like it's sort of like maybe people then think like, oh, it's WWE that drew this sort of attention. But overall, this is really a good thing for TNA and WWE, of course. So talking about WWE TKO's parent that hosts these sort of services, we see like a shift in terms of strategy from TNA in terms of their content. So TNA's YouTube Ultimate Insiders $4.99 a month plan will be sunset on June 1st. The 99 cents a month plan will remain available. We didn't take this decision lightly. We're dropping support for the Ultimate Insiders plan because we can't deliver the premium fan-centric experience a YouTube-owned product. We want you to join the party on TNA Plus. So we're offering 2 different offers for you, etc. So leaning more into their services. For a while, it was sort of like for some pro wrestling brands, they're sort of like, rather than have like our independent thing, we'll go with Fight, we'll go with DAZN, obviously we'll go with Peacock. AEW hasn't really joined any of the fray yet there, but sort of like TNA Plus stood alone. I don't know what type of numbers they're doing, but it keeps going. And obviously they're paying for this expensive, like what I imagine JML on Twitter, the jml.bsky.social, had an interesting note that he said that looking at Anthem's website, that Richard Schaefer looks to be gone from Anthem, in that he's not listed on their executive list anymore. So we've talked about it in the past, sort of Richard Schaefer, who ran Golden Boy, of course, like with Oscar De La Hoya a number of years ago, who just seemed like very qualified, especially on the fighting sports end, to take on a bigger role. And at the time, it was expected that he would oversee TNA. He's not listed there anymore. It wasn't announced in any of the media periodicals. He's not on LinkedIn. So where in the world is Richard Schaefer? But
Yeah, really.
Anthony Ciccione is the president of sports, which does include TNA Wrestling and Invicta. And interestingly, on a side note, Invicta, I think, only ran 3 or 4 shows last year. And they have one upcoming. So curious to see like how that Invicta brand continues to acclimate into the Anthem world, because you'd think that there'd be a lot more consistency in shows. So that's the Anthem TNA portion for today.
Man, that was a definite deep dive into TNA. There's got so much going on right now. Sometimes that could be a bad thing, but I feel like this is all a good thing. I think things are rolling in their favor. I think they're getting good momentum right now, and the NXT thing was a shocker. So I think that's a good thing. Nobody had spoilers on it. There was nothing where people said it was going to happen. So that was fun too. Like you just kind of got rolled out, and everybody saw it. It was like, holy shit! Okay, cool.
Yeah, and they might still be, like PCO had mentioned, that they, this might have been or was D'Amour's idea to go to Montreal, which you have to book these things out, months and months in advance. But it seems to be like settling down. Like people aren't necessarily talking about needing D'Amour there as much anymore. Tommy Dreamer, who's part of management or however you define it, like he was talking about on I think Busted Open that everything is fine with the current management structure, which, what position would he be in? Not to say that, but it just seems like they've gotten over that, like, D'Amour shock, and like they're going now. And you have to be careful when you're collaborating with a big brand like WWE. It doesn't always like raise all tides, but it seems like it's going carefully. And things, I think, was somewhat controversial, but when they worked with AEW, I think it was good for them. They had maximum interest and so on. So I think if they play this correctly and slowly and smartly, it should be a good thing for them.
Now, what's going on with New Japan Pro Wrestling? What's going on with NJPW?
So ahead of the Worlds Collide pay-per-view, or I don't know if they call it premium live events now, and this is translated through X, but Kadani had wrote something curious. In the wrestling business, holding tournaments overseas and sending wrestlers overseas is an export, while inviting foreign wrestlers is an import. The yen has weakened by 50% compared to 3 years ago. It's becoming an increasingly difficult business. I will do my best. Seems like he's under a fair amount of stress, and especially with this major event with AEW upcoming, like maybe there's some concern overall. But if the yen has weakened and you're making American dollars from sending talents to the US, I would think that would be like a positive. Whereas it's understandable that it would be harder to bring in like foreign talent. But if it ever comes off and they run an event with AEW, that they have a partner to do so. But curious to see, like, especially like with, not to paint an overall picture, but Japanese executives tend to be fairly reserved, overall. Ticket sales are kind of, what was it, about 7,000 for this Worlds Collide show. So definitely a weakening of interest, at least in the ticket sales compared to other years. But, a different market. Last year was Toronto. And my curiosity continues. August 30th in DC. When I look on their event calendar for the venue, nothing is listed. So I had meant to actually call them, but forgot to do so. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But time keeps moving along for that event.
How about MLW? They got a bunch of shows coming up. Lucha Apocalypto. They've got the Summer of Beast. They got Blood and Thunder. What's the latest with MLW, Battle Riot, and all the shows that they've got going on?
So they sold out Battle Riot 6. So that's in, Center Stage in Atlanta. I think they actually had sold it out by the time we started recording last week, and there's just like resale tickets available. So that's a plus. It's like, I don't know if it's a hot shot show, but you have the Battle Riot, which is kind of like a schmoz, but whatever works. So that's that. Now, the Blood and Thunder show in Florida, based on the patterns, again, it looks like the first and some of the second rows go on with a little bit of smattering here or there. For Summer of the Beast in Queens, New York, depending on the setup, maybe half the tickets sold. There's still pairs and several tickets together in the front row, but there's some in the second and third row that were sold, maybe some beyond that aren't yet for sale. They generally tend to sell it out or do well there. Lucha Apocalypto back to Cicero Stadium is until November, so still some front row tickets available there. So not a speedy trajectory, but they might still get there. Talking about the Lucha market, they announced an official collaboration with CMLL to actually sell their merchandise through in the U.S. through their website. MLW and CMLL are proud to announce a new merchandise collaboration. The organizations will partner to release a limited edition collection of merchandise featuring CMLL branded designs and concepts, as well as CMLL's most iconic luchadors. MLW is honored to work with the preeminent lucha organization in the world and provide American fans an opportunity to get merchandise from the worldwide leader in Lucha Libre, CMLL. I'm curious, I didn't go back to check it or think about it till this point, but I'm wondering when they would announce collaborations with AAA, if they would refer to them in the same way. Interestingly, when they show the merchandise, one of the 5 pieces that they show besides CMLL, Arena Mexico, Atlantis, another Arena Mexico shirt, and is an Azteca Lucha shirt. So that might just be, okay, let's just show our our Lucha merchandise, or maybe there's some closer tie-in with CMLL for that brand. So just reading the tea leaves a little bit on that.
Interesting. Now let's talk about GC Dub. What's going on with GCW? Game changer.
So one of the most interesting notes was some concern, which I was hearing a little bit of like secondhand chat or whatever it's called about the Showboat. There's claims that it was sold and that GCW wouldn't be running there anymore. And we were kind of looking at, of course, Asbury Park is being run on August 4th, so maybe there wouldn't be something at the end of the summer. But lo and behold, they haven't been promoting it much yet, but it's on their graphic in terms of upcoming shows. Atlantic City, New Jersey, August 24th and 25th. So that relationship will continue, as as the Howard Finkel would say. But looking at their upcoming shows in Atlantic City, so the Tournament of Survival 9 is moving along well. I guess it's as we're recording this in a day, so we'll get a closer count right before. But as of now, the 8th row ringside was still available, so selling out the first 7 rows. 8th row still available, so that's an impressive showing. They usually do well. And Cage of Survival 3 the following day picked up as well, so that's the 5th row still available. In helpful news, when I went to Ticketmaster Canada, I don't know if they're supposed to share more information on the ticket page or why, but for GCW show at the Opera House, it had the net capacity, so the total number of people that could be in the venue is 490 for the event. So that was a cool little tidbit of information. Just going backwards in terms of what we know of upcoming GCW shows. So Honolulu at the Convention Center, November 2nd. So I'm really curious. Another return to Brett's hometown, Rochester, September 15th, back at the Water Street Music Hall. September 14th, back at Harpo's. We talked about Atlantic City on August 24th and 25th. A debut in Salt Lake City on August 18th at the Clubhouse. August 17th, a return again to LA. So June 15th is the next upcoming show in LA. So we know signs already on the books. August 4th in Asbury Park. John may or may not be there at the House of
Hopefully,
Independence. Yes. August 2nd in Cleveland at Temple Live. June 28th in Brooklyn, the aforementioned Bloodsport show where I'll be. July 20th in Indianapolis, July 19th in St. Louis, July 18th in Louisville. So a rare triple shot for a market that's not hosting, a major WWE or AEW event for GCW. Toronto, we talked about on July 5th. There's a Montreal show. Actually, I'm not sure if that's day, not to confuse things, but I think there's a Montreal show about that date or a day or two difference from there. And then just looking at June quickly backwards, Dallas, Houston on 29th and 28th, June 16th and 15th, Phoenix and LA, Denver on the 14th, which brings us back to Atlantic City on June 1st and 2nd.
Love that. Now let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about women's wrestling. What's going on with WOW, the women of wrestling?
So the main thing that I'm just thinking about and we're considering is that some news regarding a renewal should be coming in the next month. John, I think you were the one that originally sent me the press release last year around that time. But tickets were announced on sale in late June for the second season. So we're looking to see when the third season will be. The Tongan twins, hope I'm not messing up, but the twins that were in the news recently for a while, for controversial reasons, back and forth, they had talked about like the third, referring sort of like in the abstract to the third season, in terms of their situation. So seems like it's a go. WOW is 52 weeks a year, even though it's syndicated programming. So let's see if it keeps going.
What about Sakyaban? Keeping up with the women's wrestling. What about them? What's going on with the Joshi promotion?
So as we're recording this, the previous night, May 30th, was their third show in LA, following the show in New York last year, which I went to, the show in Miami, which they claimed were a couple thousand people there. That was at an event, so I don't know if people just floated in from the event or 2,000 people bought tickets. They claimed that 1.3 million people watched on TikTok their previous events. I haven't seen the TikTok numbers yet, but they plan to also release it on other platforms. I think they've put it on YouTube in the past. So I don't know. People aren't really talking about them that much. They're not necessarily looking for pro wrestling press to talk about them too much. They've had a different approach, but flying in town from Japan, having these, some of whom seem to be like investors or tied into the promotion and so on, but having these designers and specialists like involved, it just seemed, and like some of these smaller venues, but like premium type of venues, cool venues, it just seems like an expensive proposition, and I'm not sure over the last 9 months if they've gotten anywhere. I mean, I know that their focus was on like all different forms of media, getting into like maybe cartoons and merchandising and licensing, and that sort of thing takes a long time. So maybe they're in it for the long haul, but in terms of thinking about it traditionally as like a pro wrestling promotion, I'm not sure if they're getting anywhere. Now, this sounds made up, but I promise it's true. I can't verify if these were people that actually worked for the promotion, or people just talking or whatever it may be. But in New York, when talking about their streaming, some of the production people were like, we're not making any money from this streaming, which is kind of like, yes, I know it's coincidental. Like, one of the only people that would care would be me, and I happen to have heard it. I think I was intermixed among people that were working for the promotion. It was kind of weird to know where to sit in the front row, but that's what I heard at the time. But whether, whatever the truth is, like, I don't think TikTok would be like a major platform for making revenue. So it's just curious to see, like, what do they do, and how long is this going to last?
Interesting. What about Prestige Wrestling? What's going on
So
with them?
Prestige on the other coast, kind of like it's a little bit of the summer of like regional promotions, like stretching a little bit, which I respect. Like Limitless Wrestling, as we talked about in Maine, Prestige here. So they have a venue that looks really cool. It's a college basketball arena, which is a few thousand seats. So they're sort of promoting it, in advance. William Quintana is one of the promoters. Combat Clash, PDX, the Viking Pavilion on July 12th. So a lot of seats available at the moment, but it looks like in a quick count, trying to look at the patterns and count one by one, basically, or multiplying the rows, it looks like about 400 tickets moved so far.
Now, just a interesting thing that I found, nothing to do with as far as any of the promotion we talk about, just an individual wrestler. I just found this very, very interesting. I don't know if you saw this. Kind of breaking some news here on the show. Gable Steveson has now signed with the Buffalo Bills to play defensive tackle. I just thought, okay, failed wrestler, right? He wasn't doing well in NXT. He only had, I think, 12 matches. One that was on TV. It was against Baron Corbin. It wasn't very good. And now he's with the NFL, signed with the Buffalo Bills. I just thought, like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it seems like in the NFL, that if you have like a particular skill that you could sort of be trained to be a specialist. I feel like there's people in college that come out of college that were like top level in different sports, and somebody in the NFL sees something in them, based on their speed, their strength, whatever it is, and they train them for a very specific role. It might be like, what's the risk, right? Like if he's signed now and he's cut during what do they call it? Training season or during the camp period, training camp, then like it's not as much of a risk. So it's kind of a cool thing. Obviously a very talented athlete. I know that he went into, well, not necessarily went into, but early on in NXT there were some accusations of sexual misconduct nature, right? I'm thinking about the guy that was with NXT. Don't want to. So there was those allegations, which nothing seemed to come of it. But now he's trying something else, and we know Brandon Thurston is is a local and a Buffalo Bills fan. So maybe we'll get some deep dives in terms of how the community is taking to him from Brandon one day.
Yeah, very interesting to see that. Remember Brock Lesnar a few years ago, well, 20 years ago now, tried out for the Minnesota Vikings. Same thing. He was going to play defensive tackle. He almost made the team, and he's never played football before. So very, very interesting. I know Gable has, but just interesting the kind of dynamic that they think, okay, we failed at wrestling. Let's try football.
Yeah, it seems like one of the only like high level sports where you can not like, because it's so specialized, right? Like you can have like one particular skill, and if you just like learn that skill and drill it, not that it's easy, right? What are the chances of making the NFL? But like if you're very talented and so on, that there's at least a shot to try out. Maybe something like rugby or something like that, where you have a particular speed and strength and become like a specialist. Not this stuff way outside of my knowledge zone, but I think it's kind of limited. But if anything, in terms of the major sports in the U.S., that's somewhat of a possibility.
When you look at just what's going on with WWE right now, right? NXT and TNA seem to be doing something together. Ethan Page showed up. Obviously, Jordynne Grace is going to be wrestling Roxanne, champion versus champion. AEW and New Japan, I know we kind of talked about New Japan before, but do you think that Forbidden Door is becoming kind of passe, that they're not really doing a good job with this coexisting of brands, or do you think that they're okay and Forbidden Door will be hot again like it was last year and 2 years ago?
It seems like if they ultimately deliver, then you can like sort of like bring the brand back, but it's not really a Forbidden Door, right, anymore, because they've just been collaborating so long, right? Like with WCW and New Japan, like, at certain points it was like interesting and exciting, but like in terms of the American side of like New Japan talent at the time, eventually when you had talents just like going through pro and worldwide, like just like they were everyone else going through the grind, like Public Enemy and the Nasty Boys and whatever, like it didn't become special anymore. So like, yes, you like drop these people as like talents from New Japan as a surprise on like Collision, but like, what does it ultimately mean? You have to treat it like something special, because like for pro wrestlers that don't ultimately break through, often their like debut is when it's full of possibilities and exciting, and then 3 months later people are like, okay, they're just a part of things. So if you're going to do these collaborations and they're based on firstly, the uniqueness of promotion versus promotion or promotional team ups, you have to like keep it special.
All right, Lavie, let's head towards the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. What do you got going on in this crazy world?
Yeah, follow me on X, LAVIE MARG. Check out my long form articles on Lion Cub Job Search and join us on LinkedIn, The Business of the Business.
Lavie, thank you. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.